Everybody, thank you for listening to Living the Next Chapter. So glad you're back. And today I have a very special podcast episode. I had put a call out for guests to come on the show on a Facebook group. And in 2 days, I think we had 300 comments. I've been doing interviews and pre-interviews and recordings since then. And I'm just amazed at the quality of the people and the stories and the amazing connections that can be made through podcasting. This is a great example of that. I had our guest today reach out to me to be on the podcast and talk about a book that's coming next year. And in our conversations, as we went back and forth, I felt a very strong connection with this person because of things that are happening in my own personal life and in our home. And the insight, the love, the genuine care and concern that this guest has shown throughout the pre-interview and communication back and forth and through the recording, I have come out on the other side of this episode a better person. And I have a long way to go. But when it comes to this topic that we're going to talk about today, and you can tell by the title of the podcast episode what we're going to be speaking about, what I'm asking for is for you to listen to this podcast episode and listen without prejudice, listen without filtering, and hear the hearts of two people having a conversation about something that is extremely personal to me, but is very impactful for many. And we get some really good insight today from Jillian Abby today here on the Living the Next Chapter podcast. And I hope you enjoy the conversation. I hope it sparks thoughts. And I hope that you reconsider maybe some of the comments or some of the things that you may have thought or said in the past and understand a different way of looking at this and a focus on the people involved. Very special episode of Living the Next Chapter. It's actually going to be a 2-part episode. We extended the recording of the podcast and did a second recording. So there's well over an hour's worth of material here. This is part 1. Part 2 will be coming. Our conversation with Jillian Abby here on Living the Next Chapter. I hope that this challenges you. Thanks for listening. Hello, everybody. I have probably the single most important podcast episode I think I've done so far today with somebody who is now, I can say, a friend that has reached through my computer screen and has encouraged me in more ways than you will ever know. I have today with me Jill Abby, and we are going to talk about something that's going to, I hope and pray deep down, that will help many, many people. First of all, Happy Pride.
Happy Pride.
Come on.
Or as some people like to call it, June.
So we connected about coming onto a podcast. And in our pre-interview conversation, you and I together, I shut the camera down and I had so many thoughts and things that are in my mind. And we want to get into that today. But first, I want you to introduce yourself to everybody. Tell the world who you are and the great things that you are doing to help people. I'm so happy to be with you today.
Gosh, Dave,
Let's go.
like
Let's
the
go.
sweetest intro ever.
Come on.
And if you're ever looking to adopt, So my name is Jillian Abby. I am a Jill of all trades, as I like to say. I have a very interesting career path. But my newest endeavor is actually as a writer and an author. And I use writer loosely. I'm definitely more of a storyteller. I have started a blog called, it's at queerabby.com. And then I wrote my memoir, and it got picked up by Hay House Publishing. And so it's coming out April 25th of 2023. And I still have to pinch myself that this is my life.
Can we put that in the calendar that we're going to talk again on that date? Or close to that date?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
I wanted to just put that little plug in there
Yeah.
because we
that
do have to
sounds
circle
good.
back. Okay. Continue, please.
Yeah. So, but other than that, I am a mom to two wonderfully feral homeschooled children. And we live in Tampa, Florida. And also I came out as a lesbian when I was 38 years old after a wonderful, beautiful 20-year relationship to somebody that I loved and cared about very dearly, but had to face the serious truth about myself. So here I am in my big gay life, trying to work towards getting my PhD in everything gay, learn as much as I can about the community, and really be here as a support to others. I think my biggest goal in my path is to be a bridge for people who want to understand the LGBTQ community, but maybe don't know where to start or don't know what questions to ask.
And you've already started with me and our family. Thank you. If you don't mind, I'm going to jump in here too.
Absolutely.
So recently in our family, we've had a change, something that at first I never thought might ever happen in our family. But at the same time, in the newness of this, our daughter has come out to us as well. And, years ago, many, many years ago, when Hadley was young, I was telling you, I remember seeing the Pride Parade on the news, and these big burly dads, scruffy, rough-looking guys standing there with terribly printed cardboard signs. You can tell they're not good at art. And they're holding up these signs at the Pride Parade, right in the middle of it. And the sign said, "Free dad hugs." And when I watched it on the news, something said, "Do that." And I'm like looking around, like, what does that mean? Do that? Who said that, first of all?
Who said that?
And you mean me? Like, why would I do that? Why would I drive to Toronto? It's hours away. Why is that important? Fast forward, and now we have a daughter who has gone through the process of, in a way, I think she anticipated that we would be horribly upset or reactive and scared, and there would be anger and harsh words. And I think she built up this anticipation of what might be. Mm-hmm. And in that process, backed away quietly into her room and into herself, and did a lot of things for the last time. Last snuggles on the couch, last movie nights, last birthdays, last Christmas, knowing full well that when she came to us and laid this in front of us, that there could be the potential of, do you want me to leave? And that broke my heart. I got to let you know, because Hallie's my buddy and I can't imagine my life without her. Right. So I was looking for somebody to help me to build a bridge. And lo and behold, an email pops up from you about coming on a podcast to talk about your book. And I'm like, I can't believe this is happening. That I get to speak to a great author, but an author with a message that personally is for me and my family. Yeah. So I'm coming as a student, as a father, and I'm dedicating this to Hadley today, because I want her to hear this. I want her to hear my real feelings, but I want her to also hear that she's not wrong. Mm-mm. And that she has now another ally in her corner that she can reach out to. So with that, I'm flipping it back to you now as I sip my coffee and listen.
Well, Dave, I have to say, I'm so grateful to you for taking that brave first step and saying, maybe I don't know, maybe I've got a lot to learn, and I want to do better.
Yeah.
I want your message, your feelings are still rooted in love for Hadley, and I am so proud of Hadley for the courage that she's shown too. I don't think a lot of people realize how scary it is to come out. Every single time. I mean, even when my pest guy shows up the door and says, "Is your husband around?" And I have to say, "Oh
gosh,
no, my partner Jen is though." It's scary every single time, but especially at the beginning, and especially for the people that you are closest to. There's a reason those dad hugs are needed and mom hugs are needed at Pride events, because not everyone is as fortunate to have parents to do the work. So, I mean, with that said, what would you like to know? Where do we start?
I guess for me, my dogs are barking. My wife is coming home right now, so they're going ballistic upstairs, howling and doing everything. So, so that'll be fun for editing. But I digress. I want to know from your perspective for Hadley.
Yeah.
What would you say to her as all the newness of this and her interactions with family who don't understand? Maybe they're not where I'm at right now. I'm new to this, right? So, but I know that there's family members that are going to hear this podcast and might even be surprised to hear me talking about this at all. Yeah. But deep religious beliefs and history, a lot of good things. I'm not right. But at the same time, a lot of confusion that they're going to, I anticipate, is going to come in questions. How does Hadley deal with family when family doesn't understand or support?
That's a great question, and one that I get a lot, especially when religion is involved.
Yeah.
I feel like in many situations when people are having difficulty with someone, a family member or a friend who's coming out, sometimes they fall back on religion as the reason or whatever variety of reasons. But a lot of times at the root of it is fear. Yeah. Fear that her life maybe won't be able to live up to the same potential or the same happiness or the same kind treatment from people because of the fact that she's part of the LGBTQ. And in some ways, it's true. There are absolutely challenges being part of the community. But if I could say something to Hadley, it's that things are just going to get so much better for you. And that it's so hard to explain until you're going through it, but living your life in integrity and as the way you were created to be is honestly, it's the most beautiful thing. And when I started doing that, when I stopped having to lie about who I was, life fell into place. All of these, serendipitous moments all started to line up. I personally am not a religious person, but I feel that I have a very strong connection with God. And I had to lean on my faith and my spirituality a lot in the coming out process, because so much of it was a leap into the unknown and I didn't know what would happen. And so I had to trust that if I listened to that voice, that little talking voice, where did this come from? If I listened and did what felt true, that everything was going to be okay. And it's been incredible. And I'm so grateful that Hadley had the insight and the courage to do that. Because, to those family members who maybe wish that that is not what she had done, what is the alternative?
Yeah.
Do we want our children to live a lie the rest of their lives?
Yeah.
So it's hard. It's absolutely hard. But, for Hadley, as far as approaching the people who are having a hard time, the only thing you can do is stay strong in a place of love and come at them from a place of love, and know that just by living your life, you'll be an example to them that they'll eventually see, just by virtue of the way that you're living, that this is not the boogeyman that they thought it was.
Yeah. Yep.
So, but it's hard. I understand it. Yeah.
So, Jill, can you help me to understand, like, there seems to be, like, for example, they painted a crosswalk in downtown St. Catharines where we live, and they did the pride flag we had people doing burnouts with their cars and wrecking it. We had hateful comments responding to the mayor who was doing a dedication of it, and why do we default to hate so quickly? But at the same time, I felt like when Hadley was coming out to us, that she was locked and loaded for an argument. Like she's like me. She did her homework. Like she had facts and figures and stats, and she was ready to go. Yeah. Right. And that's exactly how I am. I'm very analytical. So I watched myself talk to me. It was really freaky. But I noticed that for as much hate and disdain is thrown onto the community, I also feel some of that come back. I don't know if it's just in a reaction as well. And I don't know how to deal with that as a parent, in that the community is at times, not everyone, obviously, but it seems like in some situations where I'm the target as a man, right? And I don't know how to handle that.
Sure.
Right.
It's hard because it's so to your point about how when Hadley came out, she was also, locked and loaded and prepared to fight if need be. And I get that. I was in that same place too, for quite a while, feeling like I had to defend my identity. Until I reached the point, and I was talking to a friend who said to me, so what? So what? So what if you're gay?
Yeah.
So what if they don't like it? Like, you just need to keep doing your thing. There's nothing to defend. It's the same thing if people were like, we don't like people with brunette hair. Okay, born this way. I don't know. What do you want me? Fine, I'll get highlights. I don't know. But there's nothing to defend. It's who I am as a person. And so, unfortunately, there's fear and there's hurt from both communities. And I believe so much in like what we reflect out, we get back. And so part of my messaging and talking to people within the LGBTQ community, knowing the kind of trauma that they've been through and the hate that they've received, is just to really, if you can do anything, not reflect that back, to always try and approach, if not from a place of love, a place of curiosity. Isn't that interesting that they feel this way? Isn't it interesting that they think that? I've always found, and again, I don't want to make the whole conversation about religion, but I do try and study the Bible a lot because it's an important document, but it's also a tool that is used to invalidate me by some people. And so I study it because I want to understand what's going on. And I guess what I always come back to is there's so much love in the Bible.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's curious to me of how do we get the people who read the Bible and follow the Bible to say, you know what? There's this, there's that, but I want to love above everything else.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of resources out there. So we don't need to discuss that specifically today, but for anyone who's listening, who is struggling with that, there's books like Unclobbered by Colby Martin, who's an ex-evangelical pastor, straight man, no skin in the game, no benefit from helping, but he really walks through the history of the clobber passages. So, and some people, everyone has their own process in working through their own fears and misunderstandings. So
I think I saw on your website, you mentioned that in some countries you're a criminal.
Yes.
Which is, I kind of glossed over that in the past. And then I'm like, wait a minute. What?
Yes.
Like, seriously.
A dear friend of mine lives in Pakistan. If I were, well, for one, I would not be in Pakistan with my partner, but we could be put to death by stoning in 2022.
2022.
Yeah. And there's plenty of other countries. My group of homeschooling friends, we were trying to plan our next getaway. We were talking about maybe doing a cruise. And they said, well, let's cruise around the Caribbean. Maybe we can go to Jamaica or, Antigua. And I said, oh, well, those are two islands where homosexuality is still technically illegal. And even though I don't know that they enforce it very much, I'm still at a risk by going to that country with my partner. And they said, well, you could just go as friends.
See, okay, so there we go. That's where I have a problem, right? Is that people have that as a default, that you can just, like a hat, you can just take this off whenever you want, but it's not convenient, and then put it back on when you get home, right? I don't like that.
Right. And think about that from anyone's perspective, regardless of your sexual orientation. Think about a person you love so dearly in your life, and then somebody saying, well, if you want to exist safely, you have to pretend like you don't have that kind of love for them. Have fun on your vacation. It's really, there's a lot of things that people say that are really well-intentioned, but if you flip them on their head and said the same thing to a heterosexual relationship, it would seem absurd.
Yeah. Well, that's crazy. I can't imagine my wife, Jen, and I planning a holiday about where the places we would be arrested or not, just because we're married. That is ridiculous. Right. I do not understand in 2022 how that's even a thing.
Right.
So, yeah. And then I think I saw you mention, it was maybe on your TikTok or something, you did a teacher student back and forth. It was hilarious, by the way. So I love your TikToks. Everyone has to go and follow on TikTok.
I'm blushing now. I'm so
please. Your stuff is just amazing. Anyway, you're talking about, well, why does the gay community need to have a pride parade? Like we don't have a pride parade for us. And I won't do it justice, but you have to go see it. But summarize that for me quick.
Well, so it's interesting that you bring that up because actually I just posted a blog on it as well called Pride, Parade, and Prejudice. And it's the 3 most common questions I get every year. And that's, why do you need a parade that celebrates your sexuality or sexual act? And then if you don't want to be othered, why do you other yourself through pride events? And I'm totally forgetting the last question right now, which is hilarious because I've been working on this blog all day. But yeah, we get a lot of things of like, we don't do this in the heterosexual world. I don't have to announce my heterosexuality. But gay people do. And there's so many layers to that. So yeah. And now I'm blanking, of course, on that particular TikTok as well. Yeah. But
just the idea that, that people are upset that we have to have a month set aside, right?
Right.
Like when we just talked about you can't go to certain places in 2022. And now we're complaining that we have a month set aside for the community. I don't get it. There's a disconnect.
Yeah. We have National Pancake Day and National Donut Day. We can celebrate a civil rights movement because really at the end of the day, that's what pride is. It's not about sexuality or gender identity. It's about how the LGBTQI community has been suppressed and attacked and still continues to be so to this day. This year in the United States was one of the biggest years for anti-LGBTQIA legislation in recent history. Yep. And the last biggest year was last year. It keeps increasing the amount of legislative attacks against our community. And coming from a heterosexual relationship my entire life and now being viewed as a very out and vocal lesbian, a lot of people ask me why I am so loud and vocal. And it's because I don't know that I ever realized what the LGBT community still goes through. I thought when the Marriage Equality Act came out in 2015 in the US that like, oh, we're good. Everyone can get married. And there's so much more to it.
Yeah.
So Pride is a celebration of civil rights. It's definitely not about sex.
Yeah.
And anyone who thinks so can Google lesbian bed death. Sorry, that's probably inappropriate right here, but it's a thing. So,
really? Okay.
Yeah, that's for another.
That's another.
We'll save that one for another episode, though.
Okay, so I'm hoping we can extend this, but Zoom is giving us my limits, and that's fun. So before we jump again and do like a part 2, what is your advice to me as a dad, as a parent? What do I need?
Love and curiosity. She just needs your support. She doesn't need you to agree. She doesn't need you to understand. Just love her as her own process and her own identity unfolds, and understand too that it may change as things go along. Sometimes we think that we have one feeling and we realize that, oh no, as we do more research, it's something else. For example, in my own coming out process, when I originally came out about a decade ago to a therapist, I told the therapist I was bisexual. I thought I had to be. Here I was, married to a man.
Yeah.
Of course I'm bisexual. And through my process, then I was able to identify more that no, the type of feelings that I had for my ex-husband wasn't the same as the attraction that most people feel for their spouses. So, and I am actually a lesbian. I'm not bisexual. So it's a process, but just being there to ask the questions and give the hugs and understand that it is a mental roller coaster too. It's a big journey to go through.
Okay. So we're going to do a part 2 here in a moment.
Sounds good.
And again, Jill, I'm so thankful that you have time, to do this. But I want to get a little bit into more of the resources you have, your book, and we'll talk about that in a minute.
Sounds good. I'm pretty sure the kids haven't burned the house down or anything, but you don't know with the homeschoolers.
Right? We can do a quick check.
All right. Good. All right. Thanks, Amy.
Part 2 is coming up. And like I said, we had recorded this far and we got to the end of our Zoom limit. And so we we asked each other if we could continue, and we did. So part 2 is coming up, another roughly 30 minutes of this conversation. Go over and check out the next episode. And like I said at the beginning, I hope this challenges people wherever you are in your belief system, in your experience in life, and as a parent, as somebody from the community, however you are listening to this. Thank you, first of all, for listening this far. I really do appreciate it. But Jillian takes us even further. And like we said during the podcast, this podcast is really meaningful for our family, and we're dedicating this to Hadley. And we are proud of you, and we love you forever and always. To my best buddy. On to chapter 2 here in a moment. Thank you guys for listening.
Mindshift Power Podcast, the podcast for teenagers and those who work with them. There's a huge problem in America today. There's a very large disconnect between teenagers and the adults who work with them. I'm looking to bridge that gap with real, raw, honest conversation, not held back by the chains of political correctness. You cannot solve a problem you do not understand. Want to understand teenagers today? Listen to this podcast. This podcast is for teens in the U.S. and Canada. To learn more, go to fatimabay.com/podcast or just look for Mindshift Power Podcast on any listening platform. I look forward to you being a faithful listener.